Okay, in today's interview, we have a very, very, very interesting guest, very successful investor, entrepreneur, real estate investor, and what I found to be probably the first and the most interesting video on the currency reset. We talk about that a lot on this channel here, but the most detailed and interesting video that I found was through this individual, and his name is Neil McCoy Ward. Also got some fantastic videos on real estate, on silver. So I want to encourage everyone to hit the like button on either side right there. Down in the description, you will see Neil's YouTube link and YouTube channel to go ahead and subscribe. Fantastic videos about why he went all in on silver and the currency reset. He was one of the first people to get blacklisted on the subject. And so without further ado, I just want to give a special shout out also to our show sponsor, Vizsla Resources, one of my favorite silver and gold stocks. So thank you, Vizsla Resources. And it's great to have you on, Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
So how does it feel to be the first person that was blacklisted on the subject of the currency reset?
Oh, I just laugh about it now, to be honest. It's just amusing to me because, when I first did it, I didn't even realize the severity of the situation. I was just doing it because a lot of people were talking about it and referencing it. And I looked into it. I'd never really heard of the World Economic Forum. I mean, obviously I'd heard about them, but I never looked into them properly. So I started to research it, and it was just fascinating to me. So it took me down the rabbit hole as usual. And I put months and months of study into the World Economic Forum because I wanted to understand what it was all about. And the more I found out, the more I disliked.
So why don't you give us an idea of where your research led you, and also, flash forward to today. We're at the start of 2021, and we're kind of in this very weird dystopian place. How has your views shifted from when you did that research to what you're looking at right now in 2021?
Well, firstly, when I did that research, it took me months to go through it. And I was watching all the videos. And one thing that's quite interesting is if you understand the principle of indoctrination. So I found myself, going through all the material and thinking, okay, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe that's a good idea. And they were talking about all the green energy movement. And I thought, okay, this sounds like a great idea. So even though I had different facts from both sides, as we all do, some people, there's a lot of conflicting information on the green energy movement as to how sustainable and how much resources it takes to even make the green energy in the first place, all this. And I was on board with it. I thought this is a good concept. But then when I started to look into who was behind the renewable energy movement, companies, I don't know if I should mention them online, but certain companies, they're on the video, they got blacklisted. I'm like, why is one of the biggest oil companies in the world behind the green energy movement? Why is this company here behind green energy when their CEO is openly, massively against green energy? So I started to look into it. And then, of course, I noticed all the partners and the sponsors. And I went, hold on, what's going on here? These are all banks. These are all huge financial institutions. What has this got to do with green energy? And that was really, that's where it took me. And I got to the point where, and then they say, of course, oh, we're an open society. Anybody can come, anybody. So I looked up the fees and the tiers, and it's anywhere from 65,000 francs or whatever it is. It's like $70,000 up to 700,000 US dollars to go and attend. That isn't the normal person, So it really got me thinking about all this stuff. And nothing has really changed that much in my views. More of what you'll notice is what they say are nice things to have. And they talk about the different governments and they say these are nice things that it would be great if we achieve them in the future. Just go back 5 years and look at the things that they say would be nice to have in the future. It's not really, it's more of a forecast or a prediction of what will happen in the future. And we're seeing this more and more now of the policies are actually coming to fruition as actual facts. So if there are any sort of controversial topics on that, and you've looked at it and you've studied it, it's probably going to come true in the future.
So what do you think the future looks like then?
Well, the future is advancing at such a rapid rate that it's very difficult. I mean, if you ask most human beings, so I do mentoring, and from people who are just average people right through to very famous people, very famous entrepreneurs and celebrities and people, and you look at when I ask them the questions around their goals and what they want to be doing in a few years' time, the majority of people have no idea what they'll be doing in 5 years' time. They can't even contemplate what that will look like. Most can do about 2 years, 2.5 years, but the majority simply cannot get past that. And that's because, and this has changed a lot. 5 years ago, when I used to ask people, they could get to 3 or 4 years, and it's slowly getting shorter and shorter because technology is advancing so much. It's just if we're having this rapid change in technology. So what is the future going to look like? It's going to look nothing like it does right now. I thought virtual reality actually would have come into fruition a lot sooner than it has. I didn't think we'd still be having phones at this stage. I thought maybe we'd have glasses or something like that. But of course, if you look at Elon Musk, and again, this links into some of the plans with AI, robotics, human augmentation, as the World Economic Forum talk about. This is probably going to be a combo of these things. Elon Musk has created Neuralink now, and that's advancing quicker and quicker. So eventually, you may have seen the videos, you may not. In a couple of years, you won't even need to type in your phone anymore. You'll just be able to think, and it will go into, you probably won't even have a phone, but you can send a message to someone. You can write your book rather than like, when I've written my books like this, and I don't like typing, now the next advancement was audio, so talking into your laptop to write your book, which I did. But I think in the future, it will just be thinking and it will come down, which sounds quite crazy. But I think that's what will happen. We're going to see more advances doubling over and over again in technology, in finance as well. I think the world of finance will look nothing like it does now. I think we'll be going to a crypto or a digital currency very, very quickly. And I do think we're going to see a battle of the currencies. There's going to be some sort of currency wars in the future.
And when you speak of currency wars, do you mean in the traditional sense of government fiat currencies, or do you think different factions of control powers trying to be the digital currency that everybody uses? What do you mean by that?
Well, if you speak to most economists or even the YouTube, economists, everyone has a different viewpoint. So a lot of the mainstream economists, they're way out, and I don't, without being rude, I just think they're not necessarily they're too old, but they've been doing the same thing for so long that they simply cannot see alternatives. And then you have, of course, the sort of YouTube alternative economists. And I think they're pretty good and they're pretty accurate. But again, it's so broad in terms of what people think will happen. I think we're probably going to see a mixture. I think, and again, even I could be wrong because I would class myself as a YouTube economist. I could even be wrong on it as well. But I think what we're probably going to see, and let me give you an example here. A lot of people are talking about the SDRs by the IMF, special drawing rights, and this is from the International Monetary Fund. I think, and the funny thing with this is, SDRs failed. It was a failed experiment. But because a lot of people don't realize this, they keep talking about SDRs and this is what's going to be next. The IMF's SDRs are going to replace. No, that was a failed experiment. But this has been going on and going around doing the circles now for years. And it just makes me laugh every time I hear someone talking about it. I think we're going to see some currency wars between the Federal Reserve, the ECB, and then we have the sort of outliers. So you have China with their digital yuan. It could be some sort of an Asian partnership, something like that. You could even see a Russian partnership with that. There's a lot of trade going on there. There's a lot of partnerships going on. But even that's a little bit far out. But I do think we have China as an emerging power. I think the IMF as well. I think these are being completely underestimated, the IMF, which is, as I keep saying, a private institution. It's not a charity. Everyone thinks it's a global charity. It's not. Look at the title, Managing Director. All of these things that these titles they have. the IMF is not a charity. It's a for-profit organization. That is what the IMF is. And I think they're going to have a big role. If you look at the gold reserves of the IMF, people don't even realize the gold reserves they have. So you have China with large gold reserves. You have the IMF. You have the Federal Reserve, even though they can't be audited. So we have no idea of the sort of gold reserves there. And then the ECB. And I think the ECB is going to rise somewhat. But you have to understand, and here's the difficulty. China and Japan hold the most treasuries, the US Treasury. So that's what, over $1 trillion each. The United Kingdom hold about $500 billion. And this is the challenge right now. China will eventually, I believe, dump their treasuries. And I think Japan will as well. But they can't right now, because if they dump all their treasuries, it is going to make all of their exports more expensive with the dollar. So basically what I'm saying is, what you've asked me is such a complex question. I'm trying to break it down and make it very, very simple, but it's not simple. So I do think that, to finish up. So I do think that what we're going to see is an emergence of Federal Reserve, which I think they're going to be too slow. The ECB, I think they're going to be too slow. China's way ahead of the game. Way ahead of the game. They're going to have a lot more great technology. But then you do have all these private cryptocurrencies. And if we do see a deleveraging situation, which I believe we will see in the next few years, it could be 10 years, but it could be the next few years, what's going to happen to the US dollar? It's going to devalue so significantly. And this is going to cause a lot of issues.
Yeah, huge question, and it's a question that I'm most fascinated by. I have to admit, I'm very concerned for the future. When you look into the IMF, and I essentially believe that there are sinister people that are essentially trying to create some form of a quasi one world government that enforces a hybrid communist system using technology and digital currencies. And, that concerns me. And that's what leads me to making this channel and trying to understand the future better and talking to smart people like you and silver and gold and all these things. When you look at everything happening as a whole, do you think the trend of freedoms being slowly evaporated is going to be a continual movement, or do you think that that's a unsubstantiated hiccup of just kind of the weird things that have happened in 2020?
Okay, I could answer that in 6 or 7 different ways. There's a lot of variables there. But yeah, I do see freedoms eroding further. And again, I often bring in a lot of psychology, a lot of neuroscience and things like that into my models. But I think in terms of psychology, most people understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People are not really focused right now on tier 4, tier 5 of Maslow. They're more focused on tier 1, tier 2. Food, sleeping, roof over my head, my job, don't want to lose my house. This is what they're focused on. Anything above that, people don't care. How much are you hearing about people saying, the usual sort of things? You used to hear people were really, into these movements and they wanted to do all this stuff. They don't care right now because their focus has been pushed right down to very basic, primitive motives right now. And we're in this fear mode as well. And again, we come into a tipping point model here, which is people aren't suffering enough right now. They're not suffering enough to make it worthwhile to tip the balance. So you always have outliers, and they're about 1.3% of the population. You have another tier at 3%, 4%, 7%, etc. And the outliers are the sort of people that will protest and now do extreme things. These are the ones that are just so convicted. Or it might be a case of, if you look back to, say, the 1930s, the Great Depression, where you had people who would quite literally 300 men strong would march into the town and demand food from the Red Cross, right? They would demand food, or they're going to take it. They're going to smash the warehouse door down and take it. So that's the difference you get. You get 2 types of movements there. So I don't think we're there yet. in terms of people's freedom eroding away, what you do is you do it little by little. So you do a tiny little bit and a tiny little bit and a tiny little bit. Whereas if you did it all at once, like all the things that have been going on in America, for example, if that all happened at once, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right, people would be going, what the heck has just happened? This is just so dodgy. I don't know if that's a word that translates an English word, dodgy.
No.
Yeah, they would just think that straight away. This is insanity, some of the things that are going on. But because it's happened very, very slowly, then, you know, people don't really, it's not that they don't care, but they're not that convicted to take an action yet. To move on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I think too. So what do you think, we'll get into investments and finances and kind of the ways you're preparing here in a moment, but kind of one last question on where you think this bigger picture goes. How do you see 2021 playing out? Do you think, you know, we're especially in America, but everywhere, I mean, the UN has said that the United Nations has said over 250 million people were pushed into poverty. And I'm sure it's an underestimate from the lockdowns. And, you know, in America, you can't get evicted or foreclosed on. I mean, some people might end up being 14 months behind on their mortgage by the time the new moratorium, and I think it's not until October of 2021. So you got that, you've got a large amount of people unemployed. But what happened globally, in my view, is what really occurred is you already had 75% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. You already had the majority of people that can't come up with a couple $100 on the spot. And maybe they haven't totally lost their job, but now they're in total financial ruin. And I mean, if they don't get their check every 2 weeks, it's over. And so you've got this very weird position. And then here in America, you've got the Democrats that have taken over, and, you know, you had Janet Yellen calling for more and more and more. The head of the IMF said, spend as much as you can. What do you think this is all going to look like here in 2021? Is the printing presses going to go to high heaven? What do you kind of expect, through this year and beyond?
Yeah, well, what I expect is the unexpected. That's the first thing. I don't expect anything, because what I've realized is that all of my modeling, all of my forecasting, which have always been extremely accurate, have been shifted a lot. So, for example, my housing forecasts, they've always been so accurate to a ridiculous level. And I was expecting a housing correction in the United States around about springtime. I thought it would start to turn. That hasn't happened. And the reason it hasn't happened is, well, we could talk about 20 different variables, but some of them are what you've just talked about. And I'll give you an example of this. And I've just made a video on this, actually. But if you think about this glass of water here, it's half full. This is your money supply in the United States. Well, what happens is the government then, they go out to people and they say, hey, we're issuing these treasuries and we guarantee to pay you back in the future whatever you lend us as a treasury with interest. All right, that's normal. So the pool doesn't really change that much. Yes, it grows over time through debt and things like that, but it doesn't really change very much. But what they've done this time is they've gone to the Fed, who has this massive jug of water, and they're like, how much do you need? Just tell us. And they're pouring it until the glass is like overflowing. Where does all the money go? It goes into assets. It goes into the housing market, it goes into the stock market. So people are saying, I just don't understand it. How we keep reaching these all-time highs? How is the housing market going like that? Well, it's common sense to me. You've got all this extra money coming in, which wasn't there before. You're increasing the monetary supply. Obviously, the asset prices are going to explode. Now, what people are not talking about, although there are a couple of people that are talking about this, is what's going to happen. You have the MMT crowd, who, I'm not even going to get started on them, who say we won't have we won't have inflation because we didn't have it in 2008. That's ridiculous. Of course we're going to have inflation this time. And you're already seeing it. I would say to your viewers, check your grocery receipts from a year ago. check them from a month ago or 2 months ago, and look how much things cost now. I actually have a client, and he owns a large like food manufacturing design company, like huge it is. And he's the CEO of it and all that. And he told me that what they do now, the supermarkets, like constant, it's just getting faster and faster. And, food providers, they're constantly wanting their packaging redesigned. So he's making a fortune from this. And he told me the name, it's like shrinkflation or something like that, what they call it. So what's happening is, you get your bag of potato chips, right? And I gave an example of this on one of my videos. There's this massive bag, and I was like, oh, whoa, look at the size of this. I open it and air just hits me in the face. I looked at the bottom, there's this many. And that's a perfect example of what's happening. They don't want people to see actually, inflation is hitting food prices. In fact, the World Food Index just in December published their findings from the year, and it was shocking. I would recommend everyone go and look at that. Food prices are exploding right now. So we are going to see inflation, and it's not going to be measured by the CPI, because obviously, if you're the government, why would you measure it in a way that was fair? You don't want people to see this stuff, right? You want people to think everything's fantastic and great. So you use, things like the CPI. I don't look at that. I look at other metrics. So we're going to have this inflation. It's going to come in and it's going to be heavy. And try and think of an example. But have you ever turned on a tap before? You turn it on and it's coming out and it's not coming out properly. And this happened to me once before I was about to go on stage and give a speech. I was trying to wash my hands, been in the restroom, washing my hands. It was not working. I was trying to turn it. It wasn't working. So I turned it all the way and it just went and water all over me. It was just very embarrassing, ridiculous. I had to explain when I went on. But that's basically what the Fed has done. They have been just trickling, trying to get it going through. And then they've just gone, okay, open the floodgates. Because there's no inflation anyway. But they're being again, let's link back to what we said at the start. They're being too short-term thinking and sighted. So what actually happens is the inflation isn't going to hit for 12 to 18 months, could even be 2 years before it actually gets into prices right at the bottom where actually consumers see these prices. So they think, oh, we're not really seeing any inflation, nothing's really happening, so let's just do another stimulus. No, let's not borrow from the pool. Let's take it from the Federal Reserve, because look at interest rates. We can borrow at next to nothing. But what they've done is they've created a liquidity trap. How do you get out of this liquidity trap when you've got historically low interest rates and there's no demand? There is no demand for production because we have an oversupply of production, especially in the US. You outsourced it all to China and Asia. So there's no production. China is like, yeah, we'll send you everything. We'll just send you the lot. And Americans, yeah. Come on, give me more, China. Give me more of the good stuff. We'll send you our dollars. And what's China been doing? Accumulating all the gold, accumulating all the resources, buying all the ports, buying all the infrastructure around the world. So it is not going to end well. 2021, I go off on a tangent a lot of time, Jake, but 2021 is going to be one of the most interesting years, I think, that we've ever seen. Apart from 2020, it's going to be quite crazy, I believe.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the other thing too, is obviously you've had supply chain bottlenecks too. So there's less availability of a lot of things. And one of my buddies can't get his new dishwasher until April because they're just not there. And so, that seems like that would have a factor too. So when you're saying 12 to 18 months, you think we're still 12 to 18 months away from starting to see a significant, or you're saying that was back then and you think we should start to see it this year?
Yeah, I think we'll see the first wave of it anytime from spring onwards, but it could be the end of the summer before we start to see it. Anytime between the start of spring to the end of the summer, we'll start to see that first wave. It could be as simple as, and again, I was one of the first people to forecast stagflation, and I took so much heat for that. I can't even tell you how much heat. People calling me every name under the sun, stagflation. We haven't seen it since 1970. We've got stagflation. So what is stagflation? It's inflation and deflation at the same time. It's a very rare phenomenon. So what have we got inflation in? Food prices. And we have all the data, even though people try and push it down, we have the data, we see it with our own eyes. What have we got deflation in? We have deflation in products and services as a result of lockdowns. So I know it's not as bad in the US, but in the UK, it is atrocious in terms of the lockdowns. The businesses are collapsing like you wouldn't even believe. So where's all the business going? Well, it's going to Amazon and eBay and stuff like that. As we know, the share prices are booming, the money's going there. We're having this massive K-shaped, et cetera, et cetera. But if you just go onto the high street and you go into any of the stores there, clothing stores, things like that, they're giving the clothes away. They're just giving it away. I went by a camping store about a month ago and I was just having a quick look and they were giving this stuff away, really expensive, high quality stuff. And they're like, you know, I mean, obviously I'm saying this tongue in cheek, but they're like, just take it. It's crazy. So we're having deflation in a number of prices where you've got an oversupply of production with just no demand.
So what do you think the result is of, you said just businesses collapsing left and right, and it's 50% of the small businesses in America, I believe, are closed permanently too. And one of the reasons maybe it's not as bad is they put all these, you're not allowed to shut things down type of. But what do you think the result of this is globally? Is this the reset in terms of you will own nothing and you'll be happy? Is this the full sweep to create a global communist dependent state? I mean, what happens and what are the results of how many people are, I mean, it's really alarming.
Yeah, well, I can't really talk into the politics of it and things because politics is not really my thing. What I do, even though people like, especially in, you know what it's like in the comments, people try and drag you in and make as if you've said something that you haven't said. So people think I'm against Democrats and the left. I'm not against the Democrats and the left. I don't really care. I sit very neutral politically. I just talk about the facts. I say, this is what is happening. Here's the facts. Here's the statistics. And then I get blacklisted or banned because you're only allowed to talk about statistics that fit a certain agenda. But that's all I do. I just talk about, stats and things. So let me answer your question as to what will happen with that. Well, the fallout of all the businesses collapsing is unemployment. And the US, again, they use U3 for unemployment, which is just completely the wrong way to actually measure unemployment. Really, you should use U6 at the minimum. I would say there's things above U6 that you should measure. So I think it's, as of recording today, it's about 6.7% that they say it is. I would say it's closer to about 15% unemployment. I think that's a more accurate number. And again, you have other people that will say it's 25, 26%. I think that's a little bit extreme because they're including gig work and all that sort of stuff in that. But I would say it's about 15% unemployment. Now, where does it become a major crisis? That was back in 2020 when we matched the Great Depression in terms of unemployment numbers. Have we really recovered all of those jobs in the last year? No, we really haven't. Some of them have recovered, but a lot of them haven't. So we're going to have this oversupply again in industries, aviation, hospitality, leisure, restaurants. We're going to have this big oversupply with a lot of these industries. So where do those people go? Well, they have two choices. They go into the unemployment pool and they gain, whatever they're going to get from the government, or they upskill or retrain, or they just go into another role that doesn't require any additional qualification. So there's really three things there. I think a lot of people will have to upskill into more tech-based jobs. I think that is the future. It is tech-based jobs as we move forward. There was another part to that I was going to talk about, unemployment. Right. So when the small businesses start to collapse, again, what many people and even economists get wrong is they talk about the big companies as employing the most people. That is not accurate. 60% of people are employed by SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises. And who pays the taxes? Who pays the city taxes, the government taxes? SMEs. Who doesn't pay that? Who offshores it to the Caymans, the Virgin Islands, the big companies? Who wants to get rid of their staff? They're open about this. The big companies. How can we get more robotics? How can we get more AI? How can we outsource? So the government, and again, I think it's a flaw with the government system, especially in the United States, where you have lobbyists and you have all the special interests. It is a flaw with the political system. It should be an unbiased political system that's based on fairness and not lobbying. So, of course, all the lobbyists, the big companies, they've infiltrated the government. They've infiltrated societies, a lot of societies. And that is a problem with these big tech companies. It's a huge problem. So what are they doing? They're actually reducing staff. They're only increasing it where there's an area to grow. But eventually they'll find ways to get rid of those staff and employees. So I do think that we're going into an employment crisis as we move forward, because we've got too many people that are trained for a world that isn't going to exist as we go to 2021, into 2022 and beyond.
And do you think that this is the currency reset that your video was blacklisted and that the IMF talks so frankly about?
I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure. What I do think is, I've got to think how to describe it.
I like you, Neil. You're a smart guy. You're also pretty funny too.
Thanks. I don't necessarily think this is the currency reset right now, because I don't think they're quite ready. I think they probably thought they were ready, but there's a lot of problems that they haven't solved yet. They just haven't figured them out. And that is cryptocurrency. That is altcoins. Again, I wish more people would study cryptocurrency. I actually feel that I did a disservice to my subscribers because I told them what I had learned from the gurus, who would say, cryptocurrency is a scam, it's a pyramid scheme, it's this, it's that. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. If you look into it properly and you understand the coins and the tokens and the security protocols and what each one does, I think cryptocurrency is the future. Things like Swift and all the banking where they charge all these, massive fees, very slow, very complex. I don't think that's going to be there in the future. I think crypto will replace a lot of that. And even saying that, I don't think a lot of the commercial banks will be there in the future either. Every time we have these crises, you have this consolidation of power and they take over. And I remember, and it's such an interesting story, but back in 2005 to 2008, I was buying houses. So I was growing my real estate portfolio massively on 100% mortgages. Can you believe that?
Wow.
There was nothing, I didn't have to put down a penny. I just had to pay closing costs and all that. So I was just going out and buying houses like crazy. Now, what happened during the crash? Obviously, prices crashed down. It caused me a lot of problems, but I managed to get through with my portfolio unscathed. But what actually happened was this mortgage, and I'll give you an example of this one mortgage in a city called Coventry, and where I had a lot of houses, but there was this one that was in particular. The mortgage started out with this, long number, and then it got sold to another company, and it had /2 at the end. And I was like, okay. 3 months later, it gets sold to another company, /3, and it kept going on and on. And by the time we'd gone from 2008 to 2012-13, the number at the end was /7.
Huh.
So what happened? There was this big consolidation and overpowering all these other smaller mortgage lenders and financiers and banks and things like that. And I personally think we're going to see that again as we're going through this crisis. It's a consolidation of power, but the commercial banks are trapped. There was actually a survey sent out, and they were asking, and it was from central banks, and they were asking the commercial banks, can you survive on negative interest rates? A lot of them simply didn't respond. The ones that did respond, they said, no, we actually can't survive on negative interest rates. So let's see what happens. I think this is going to continue. We are going to see a financial crisis. We're going to see a banking crisis as well.
So on that subject, there's that idea of inflation versus deflation, another, asset crash like we had in March, April. And so people say, what's the point in buying your crypto? What's the point in buying your silver or whatever if we're going to have another crash price? Let's talk a little bit about your expectations for, why don't we start with silver, and then we could talk crypto and some of the other ways you're preparing yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I always have silver with me. So I've even got silver here. This isn't even my house, and I've still got silver with me because I take it everywhere I go. I have my, I guess when you've been in the military and you've, done certain things in the military, you always have a bug out bag. I don't know anyone that doesn't carry, that was at the level of things that I used to do that didn't have one and didn't carry it around in their car or vehicle with them. So I always have silver with me, and people think I'm mad. They're like, you're crazy. There's never going to be a massive thing. I've been in countries before where there was a very small unit of us, maybe 20 of us, something like that in a country, and things have gone bad. I've seen it firsthand where things have gone really, really bad very quickly. And if you haven't got something to trade with or do something with, you can get in trouble very quickly. So that's why I always keep silver with me. I know it's a little bit like, okay, that is a little bit far out there, but I recommend everyone have silver. Something like that's 20 ounces of American Eagles. Look how small that is. It's not too heavy. I recommend everyone has 20 ounces because in the worst case scenario, let's say we did in whatever it is in the future, another Great Depression or similar. And, where do people keep their money? In the bank. What happened in the Great Depression? The banks closed their doors all on the same day, all overnight. People couldn't get their money, some for 5 years. What did they do? Not a lot. They couldn't do anything. So it's always good to have something of value, no matter how crazy you think it is. It's worth having just in case. And that doesn't really cost a lot for those 20 ounces anyway. You could sell them. If things get good again, you just sell them. What's the big deal? So in terms of silver and why I went all in on silver, the main question I get asked is why silver, not gold? So I'll answer that for you. And that is because I'm concerned of gold confiscation. I really am. We've seen this a lot. We've seen it in history a lot. It even happened in America. And that was March, I believe, 1933 in America. And the president passed an executive order for all gold to be handed in. And a lot of people didn't hand it in. And then it became a criminal offense. And you will be this and you will be that if you don't hand it in. I think it was like $26, something like that you got for it. Well, it was $20.67 that you got per ounce. What happened once all the gold was received? They revalued it to $30 an ounce. What did they then do? Devalued the US dollar. Talk about being kicked when you're down. So people were just robbed. And then he went to the courts, and the court said that was an illegal act by the president, and that the government has to compensate all the people who they took the gold from. They never compensated anyone. It's the government. People often think of governments, right, as, because you've got to bear in mind, government is a construct of language. It's a concept, but people think of it as if it is something that's real, like a physical item, like this glass of water. That's a glass. We know that's a glass. But government isn't physical. It is simply a construct. And that's one important thing to realize. Just like if you think mafia, when you hear the word mafia, it's the connotation, it's the emotion that we attach, the brand, shall we say, that we attach to the word. What's the difference between mafia and government? Well, one's legal, one is classed as illegal. One does things that we would consider to be illegal, others do things that are considered to be legal. But is that even true with 1% of the things that government does? We already found out in the Great Depression that was an illegal act. We see things happening all the time that maybe are not how they should be. So gold confiscation, I think, is a real possibility in the future. And I don't want to be involved without having gold confiscated. I personally don't see silver confiscation as a risk. Some people might, but I don't. Silver is a commodity. It is used very regularly in green energy. What does the government want? What do all the governments want? Green energy. So I'm just going to provide what they need. They want green energy. Well, they need silver for that. I've got silver here. You can buy my silver. I've got plenty of it. If I'm compensated well, but they're not going to go and confiscate it. They're not going to fly to my vault in Switzerland. Not going to fly to my vault in Singapore. I mean, what? I just can't. I can't see it personally. So that's why I went all in on silver. And if you, I don't know if you ever saw that video, but I made a 100% return on investment on that silver, which was huge. That's a big ROI on silver. And even the stuff I bought last year is still up a little bit. It's not up massively, but it's still up a good amount. But I buy silver not as an investment. I actually buy it as a store of value, and that's it. So people say, oh, I want to make 50% return and I want to make 100% like you did. And I say, look, that isn't why I bought it. The reason I bought it in 2018-19 was for that, because I knew it had to go up. But the stuff I bought last year wasn't because I wanted to make a big profit. It was simply as a store of value. As I saw all the new currency being created, I knew it would have to rise the prices, and it would have to reduce the value of my money in the bank account. So I tell people, don't keep lots of money in the bank account. Inflation this year, or devaluation, I mean, I'd be surprised if it wasn't 8%. So if you've got 100,000, in the bank, I'd be surprised if it wasn't worth 92 at the end of the year.
And the way you look at that is, let's say you had $250,000 US in a bank account. Instead of doing that, you say, I'll buy silver instead, keep it outside of the banking system. I'll get the appreciation. Maybe I get a moonshot, but I'm looking at it as a store of real money or real savings that I'm not keeping in a depreciating fiat currency.
Correct.
Awesome. Interesting. So then let me ask you, what is your thoughts on silver and gold, where they might be able to head for a lot of investors, especially people that maybe didn't have their whole sound conviction thesis. It's been a frustrating time because it seems like everything would be in place for silver to really make a move and gold to really make a move, whereas the opposite has happened since August. Silver's still basically 50% from its all-time highs. Gold hasn't moved much, but it seems like all the winds should be in its favor. What are your expectations for silver and gold moving forward?
I think they have to go up in value. They do. They have to go up. They're undervalued in comparison to any currency. They're massively undervalued. So the challenge is we have something called COMEX. Do you know what COMEX is?
Right.
Yeah. And that's the challenge, but by the way though, Jake, they can only manipulate for so long. They're not going to be able to hold back the floodgates forever, but they can keep manipulating for a while. But eventually the floodgates will open and the price will rise. To me, I don't really care when that happens because I'm in it for the long run. I don't put money into things that I can't afford to lose. Right. So my focus, always my foundation, what I teach to everyone, cash flow first. So even below that is mindset, developing your mind, developing your own education. And once you've got that, everything else will flow. Too many people focus on external investing as opposed to internal investing. And that's where they go wrong. They say, I can't afford to pay for a mentor. I can't afford to do this training course, this online course. And then they try and go off and do it on their own. And they make all these mistakes and they lose twice the amount of money anyway. It doesn't really make any sense to me. So I always say to people, invest internally first. And you'll know to the point where you don't need to invest anymore internally. You'll get to that point, whether it's with a mentor. I've had plenty of mentors in my life. And I know as soon as I overtake them, that's it. There's nothing, more I can learn from that mentor. I've had this so many times in my life. There's training courses I've done. And I've said, right, I don't need any more training courses. Right, I have my own academy now. I don't know if you know that. I have a training academy. I teach all sorts of stuff that is very alternative. So I think personally people should focus on that first, then cash flow. And that is building up different streams of income. Don't rely on one stream of income. If you rely on one stream of income, you are in big trouble. As people have found out, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people have found this out during this crisis. They've been relying on one source of income, and now they've run into difficulty. So I have a good amount of cash flow from different sources that come into my bank accounts every single month. And another thing, don't just have one bank account. Like I have, I don't know how many, this is just some, it's like, what's that, a dozen there. I have 18 or 19 different bank accounts. I don't just have one. I have different bank accounts, because what happened to me, my bank account was frozen a couple of weeks ago. And it was my main bank account. I couldn't access it. So fortunately for me, I have all these different accounts, so I was okay. But what happens if, again, going back to Great Depression, what happens if they freeze your bank account? You're in big trouble. So you've got to have different alternatives there.
Yeah, well said. One thing that I've noticed a lot is, someone that's investing in precious metals, or someone that's investing in crypto, or someone that's investing in Tesla, there's a common thread where they think that one investment is going to make them rich. And a lot of times they don't even have that much capital going into that investment. And, what changed my life was multiple streams of income and in having a business. I don't own real estate, but I apply that same model. Would you say that that's kind of one of the most important ways moving forward into this kind of dystopian brave new world to prepare ourselves is to focus on building additional sources of income and establishing new businesses or what have you?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And a lot of people just don't know that they can do all these different things. They don't know that these websites where they can do gig work on there. There's so many things that people can do. Most people have got a skill and they can do something with it, especially if they're creative. They can outsource that work. There's a lot of companies that want to outsource and hire someone on as a gig contract. So having these sort of skills, I would say for people who are quite tech enabled, start getting into the cryptocurrency side now. Start learning all this stuff. If I had that gift, I would be doing it. But that isn't a gift that I have. I'm not good at, all the tech type of stuff. I'm of that age group, where, and again, I'm not old. I know I've got a bit of white in my beard now, gray beard coming through. But I'm not of that age group that just grew up on a phone. I didn't get my first mobile phone until probably when I was going to the army. So, it was a long time. So I didn't have all the technology. And even in the army, I was in for 10 years. I didn't really get involved with technology until I was about 30 years old, 27, 28 years old, before I started getting, used to technology and stuff. So I feel like I was too late. It's a bit like when you see kids where their parents get them playing soccer or doing golf when they're 3 years old, like Tiger Woods or someone. And they by the time they get older, they've mastered it because they put in so much time. I would say for anyone who is tech enabled like that, you're just very good with tech. Get into an industry where there's going to be a boom, where there is an undersupply of workers, where they're constantly recruiting people. And that is those sort of industries. You can earn good money. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you've got your internal situation, your programming, your mindset, you've got businesses, additional sources of income, then you've got, some potential investments. You're big into real estate. You've talked about silver. You've talked about crypto. What cryptocurrencies are you invested in? Are you high on? Is it just Bitcoin? Do you have a plethora of them?
No, so I have about 30 cryptos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I started off with the usual Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP. I bought XRP. That was the one that I've lost. Well, I haven't lost on it because I haven't sold it. Right. You only lose when you sell. And this is a concept I teach people about real estate as well. You only lose if you sell. So it doesn't matter if it's down. A lot of people say, oh, Neil, you lost a fortune during the 2008 crisis. I go, no, I didn't. I didn't sell any of it. It was just a paper loss. I made a gain when I got out of it. And people say, yeah, well, you lost. People, they don't get it. They just can't understand very simple mathematical concepts. You only lose when you sell. So my XRP is down. And then I had a basket of a few others. But actually what I did was with because I have like most people, I have a Patreon community and all that sort of stuff. So what I did was, because no one really knew about cryptocurrency, there's a few people in there that did. So I said, look, I'm going to just risk my own money. I'm going to buy a basket of 20 altcoins. So these are ones that, they might not be mainstream coins. And I'm going to put my own money up and, put a couple thousand or whatever into each coin. And let's just track it. Let's see how it goes. And actually, when I bought it, the next day there was a big crash. Do you remember everything dropped 25%? And I was like, oh, what on earth has just happened? And then, I had to laugh it off. And people are saying, oh my goodness, you've just lost 25. And I say, I haven't lost because I haven't sold it. So let's just, leave it. It's a paper loss. It will grow. I'm holding it for long term, a couple of years anyway. And then, of course, it all went back up. And we've seen some fantastic gains. One of them, I put a couple thousand in. It's already up a couple thousand. So you're talking almost 100% gain. But again, some of them, you've probably got 50% that are up. You've got 50% that are down. Overall, I'm probably up a couple thousand. You just hold it for the long term. You've got to take a basket. Anyone that's getting into altcoins and, any type of crypto, and they're just holding one crypto, I'd say is very, very risky unless you're 100% certain. But I would say buy a basket of them, see what's performing well, see what isn't performing well, and just go from there. You've just got to keep adjusting the strategy, really. But I'm happy with my crypto. I feel like I've done really, really well from it. I have doubled my money. Even today, with the losses even today, I'm still I've doubled my money on everything.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's the same. I'm really into commodities and mining stocks, and I own a very wide basket for the same reason. And I think it's one of the mistakes that I see most often. Maybe I'll talk about one on a video and someone will be really down. Maybe it had a bad day. Well, I own 20, 25, 30 of them. I have my own basket. So it's interesting to hear that same approach. Kind of in conclusion here, I know you're a busy guy and you got a lot going on. Quick question, and I'll ask you two more. One, where do you store your crypto?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm going to answer that one, Jake. I'm not going to answer that question. Right, yeah, what's the next one?
All right, so next question is, what would you say are the top 3 ways to prepare yourself for this, I don't even know what to call it, this insane, crazy world that we're headed into, and moving in direct collision course with all of these fiat currencies? What's your ways to prepare?
Yeah, well, I would say it depends on the person. We've got 3 variables both ways. But if the person is, really to the extreme concerned, I would say buy yourself a house with a good size yard and a garden, and in that way you're always going to be okay. You can, even grow your own food if you want to that extreme, I would say. But if you're not to that extreme, I would say silver, so precious metals, I think are going to be a store of value as we go forward. They always have. They've never let us down yet, so why would they let us down now? And thirdly, I would say get your money out of the bank. I'd say don't keep that money in the bank. Do something with it. Put it into, even if you want to put it into real estate. I would say, personally, I think there's a real estate crash coming. I think there's a stock market crash coming. When they're going to come is, again, the stock market crash is fairly straightforward. It's going to come when all the stimulus ends and people realize that there's nothing there. It's just zombie companies. PE ratios are way out of whack. Buffett indicators out of whack. The debt to GDP is out of whack. When people finally realize this, because it's just an emotional response right now, that's all it is, fueled by stimulus, then the stock market will come down. The real estate market is very different. There's a lot at play with the real estate market that's going to affect that. And it really depends how the new administration handles that. There will be winners, there will be losers. So whether they say rent moratoriums, let's keep this going. Well, who's going to pay for the interest in the meantime? Even if the banks say, okay, you can offset this and whatever, who's going to pay the interest?
Hunter Biden is. He's going to wire the money to everyone. That's what I heard. Just joking. Yeah, it's a weird situation, right? Yeah, who's going to pay for all this money no one's been paying?
And the property taxes. You're going to have liens coming in. Who's going to buy the liens? Right.
The IMF?
Yeah, probably. Who owns a third or more of all mortgages right now? MBS, mortgage-backed securities, the Fed. What do the Fed want? They want more mortgages. That's what they want. They don't want all this crap. They don't want the business loans and all this. They want the MBS. They want the land, the mortgage-backed securities. So you could, if one of your viewers is concerned about all their money, they could buy a house, but you're only going to gain in the short term. You've got to bear that in mind. And even if it's a year or 2 years where, let's just say we had 10% devaluation in the dollar. So you buy a house, and we'll just use an easy number, 300,000 here, and you had a devaluation in the dollar of 10%, and you've got a 3% fixed rate mortgage on it for 20 years or so. Well, that's your cost, 3%. But what if inflation is, say, 8%? Well, you're making a profit of 5%. Until you're not. And that's the key. When this turns around, you fix for 30 years, it doesn't make any difference either way. But if you're not fixed for 30 years and you fix for less than that, or you have, some people have variable rate mortgages, I don't, these sort of things, if they turn around in the medium term, let's just hope we don't have a Japan situation, 80% lost in the housing market, 80% lost in the stock market, Great Depression, 80% lost in the housing market, 80% lost in the stock market. It could be pretty bad. Who knows exactly what's going to happen though.
Yeah, interesting times. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Give us one thing you're excited about or grateful for right now in your life.
Family, always. Family and the limited freedom I still have to be able to go for a walk half a mile from my property and then walk home again.
Yeah, and you got your neighbors reporting you if you go any further. So, So everyone, thank you for listening. We got Neil's channel in the link right there down below. Fantastic channel. Obviously, brilliant guy with a lot of great insight. So be sure to subscribe to that. Hit the like button on either side right over there. Give us your silver price prediction for 2021 right there down below, and we'll see who's going to be the closest.